on a Sunday morning. Moghrey Jedoonee. It means Sunday morning in Manx. And I'm delighted to have our guest on this week's programme, Jennifer Kewley Draskau. Welcome, and well read that weather forecast in Manx there.
Keep them coming, Simon. Keep them coming.
Now, we're going to talk about various things on this morning's programme between now and 12. And in particular, we'll come to in a bit, the Norse Kings. And you've got some good information on that in Manx and in English as well.
And in Norwegian.
Really? Yeah. Well, I suppose the Norse Kings.
The Norse Kings.
Yeah. But, of course, language has been your life, I suppose, has it?
Well, I don't suppose it was supposed to be. I think my life was really destined to be the captain of the British eventing team with horses, but either I never had the horses or I never had the talent or I never had the money because it didn't actually happen. Right. So, you fall into these things. The language is interesting, and history and many other aspects of life, Yeah. So I wouldn't say it'd be my life, but I've worked with languages a bit, yeah. Yeah,
we'll come on to that later.
Yeah.
Of course, being Manx yourself, when did you start speaking Manx or learning it?
Quite a while back, because we'd been living in the Far East and we'd been living in Europe, my husband and I, and I'd been living in New Zealand with my parents, and eventually my husband and I came back to the Isle of Man with our daughter Jessica, and I started to learn Manx, and my mother said, "What on earth do you want to learn Manx for?" And I said, well, because I've been working with languages and I'm Manx, and Manx is a language. And she said, oh, right. And she was very scathing in the beginning, as that generation of Manx speakers of Manx people tended to be. But eventually she became, I suppose, seduced by my appreciation of the language. And she started coming with me to some classes that John Crellin was running in the north, in Banglantui. And my mother, having first been scathing, became a convert, and she set out to mock and stayed to pray, and she came, and for a while until her death she did attend the classes that Johnny was running, and she found people there that she liked, and so we learned together for a bit, and then there was a long period of my Manx being in abeyance because I was doing other things, and then I try and keep it up now, but I don't do as much about it as I ought to, and that is a fault, but I intend to from now on because I think it's worth doing.
Yeah, and when you was it the speaking that you learnt first, or the reading of it, the writing of it, or did it all come together?
Well, you always do learn the sounds first, and language starts with the sounds, and then the speaking, the writing comes afterwards. But I'm quite writing oriented, so I was very glad that we were offered the opportunity to learn how to write a bit as well. But of course, the spelling of Manx is it's a bit like the curate's egg. It's good in parts, and in parts it seems somewhat illogical. But we labour on with it.
Yeah, and I suppose when you were saying about your mother, what you wouldn't need to learn, and I suppose that type of attitude was quite rife in them days, wasn't it?
Oh, I think so. I think so. And Brian Stoll is very interesting about even earlier generations than my mother, who was not an ancient woman when she started to learn Manx, but generation before her. Brian has wonderful stories about people bursting in on people speaking Manx and saying, "Get away with that rubbish. We don't want to be hearing that rubbish," almost as if they had some kind of superstitious awe of the language and it was dragging them backwards. And I think that was very prevalent. I think, all honour to the original people who did start the revival of Manx and capturing the sounds of Manx, because they had a lot of opposition from Manx people. Mm-hmm. It was quite
tragic, really, isn't it? When you look back,
I know.
All right, lovely. We'll talk more, and we'll be talking about the Norse Kings very shortly. Let's take a piece of music, though, from Paul Heaton and Jackie. Minutes past 10. It's Moghrey Jedoonee with Simon Clarke here, and my guest on this week's programme, Jennifer Kewley Draskau. And we mentioned at the start of the programme about the Norse Kings, and you've got, of course, it's steeped with history here in the Isle of Man, isn't it? And, of course, the relationship with the Norse Kings. And you've got some bits and pieces there that you're going to read in Manx and tell us what it is in English as well.
So I could trade torn, tam I lai lio fiach him all, skriwyd ex fair lochnach, ons a chinja egge, nolanish. Tam I prowlde hen day dus a burl, as my shen for the devirkne smood a lie able to lie. Te lord me caun a rieken vannen, me Goddard Olaf as Magnus. Trewa mi egg, Haimid is a school ons Ballia Castle. Harrow a chanin an ons a school show. Harrow Gillian a try. Van a petchin reinet ons Pothanen. Ran a great tyen dan a Pothanen show. Van an dyn en misit en Lochlinach me Olaf as Goddard. Nugel regen Lochlinish vad the erd realty ons mannen. Renshin cow ribbon beg a cavok. Gra made grana de lure. Van ribbon Olaf Jurg, as a ribbon Goddard Bui, as fashion and monarch de lure de vey ons na podnen, as de cow na ribbonen. Tammy Kral nach rau fis ekenerd bendinse ramstu me cow na lochnally. Harau ad na denia samplerach gen lochts on in beg. So I'm saying that at the moment I'm reading a very interesting book which has been written by a Norwegian in his own language, Norwegian, and I'm trying to translate it into English in the hopes that more people have access to it. And in this book, Jon Leirfell, who was the name of the man who wrote it, he's talking about the Norse Kings of Man like Goddard, Olaf and Magnus. And when I was young, I went to school in Castletown, and unfortunately there weren't any boys in the school, only girls, alas. And we were divided into groups which they called houses. And our houses were called by the Norse names. So we had Olaf and Goddard and Lagman and so on. The Kings of Man. And we had to wear a ribbon on our tunics. If you ever worn a gym tunic, it is the most hideous garment known to man.
Not tried one on yet.
Oh, Simon, don't even go there. And Olaf had a red ribbon and Goddard had a yellow ribbon. We were very proud to wear these ribbons and go about and cheer them on at hockey matches and so on. And I don't think really that the teaching staff at Buchan I don't think they had such a deep knowledge about the actual character of the Norse kings, because you would hardly have called them moral examples for a pack of young girls.
Yes, they were a bit of pillages and what have you, wouldn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, more later.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to be going through bits of that throughout the morning with Jennifer. Of course, the stories about the Norse kings, and of course it reminds me of when we were at primary school talking about the Goddard Craven and all them, but of course we'll go into them in more detail as the morning goes on. It's 19 minutes past 10 and we're talking with Jennifer about the Norse kings, doing some stories and history about it, so connected with the Isle of Man in their history, and in English and in Manx as well. And it was interesting, having them as the house names for the book and school girls there, and such gentlemen these kings were.
As van Hydri Lochen ons mannen en misit Erik Blodux en Enman Shaw Grey Ulju. Rene Rail ons an Elian McKeown nigh key de staid. Na Keaton ren Tosh Lochlan nach Elia prowl de Gerten Graham mer an Elian. Ach ren Erik immen mach assay. Tosh in Clashton vine a Marinissen na Lochnally me geert of woer vannen son a kid kiat. On shak kid 3 jags care feed. Ren ad Shawlia ons na Berlin a rusterach as poledach vad ons neren as na cheeren Elia. And the first king of the Isle of Man was not Goddard Craven, as you might expect, but his name was Erik Bloodaxe, and the name says it all. And he was around about 940. And sometimes another Norwegian chieftain would try to get hold of the island, but Erik always succeeded in getting rid of them and driving them away. And we hear about his trips, and the Norwegians' trips all round the Irish Sea, Manx Sea. First of all, around 760, 780. And they would sail around in their boats and spent most of their time raiding and pillaging in Ireland and the other riparian areas around the Irish Sea. So that's what they got up to then. They changed later on.
Oh, well, this is sort of the old gentlemen of the Isle of Man now, of course, aren't they? We're going to have more on that, and it's fascinating, isn't it, here? And people forget that it's got such a connection with the Isle of Man, the Norse kings, don't they?
Mm.
Okay, let's do the weather forecast, and we'll do the duty chemist rotor as well. It's going to be dry with sunny intervals today, but still cold with a mostly fresh east or southeast wind. Temperatures only around 4 today. They'll look rather cloudy on Monday, but still cold and dry with a brisk easterly wind. Getting worse over Tuesday, generally cloudy with a few light snow showers, and the snow showers becoming more frequent on Wednesday with a strong and bitterly cold east to northeast wind. So if you thought it was bad today, let's hear it in Manx now.
Dan neemt de Jew, Chirm as greenig nose nall, as na sfere. Gay nya, na nya hui, as for thee be row on. Merach Jedoonee, and she as fidu laid hoich dari, Chirm, bodgelach son a good smoo, as fear. For thee rashtichen de nyaachta. As jemert kazolach, na for thee na smether.
Okay, the duty chemist rota for today, Sunday the 25th of February. In Douglas, there's the choice of 2, as always. You can go to Boots the Chemist, 14 to 22 in Strand Street. They're open now until 4:30 today. Lloyd's Pharmacy, ShopRite in Victoria Road is your alternative. That's open now until 2 o'clock. Ramsey in the north, it's Lloyd's Pharmacy, ShopRite Baring Road, open now till 2 p.m. The south of the Isle of Man is covered by Castle Pharmacy, 20 Maloo Street in Castletown. That's open from 12 midday till 1 p.m. And Peel in the west, it's Clear Pharmacy, 6 to 8 Michael Street in Peel, open 12 noon till 1. It's 26 minutes before 11 o'clock. It's Moghrey Jedoonee here on Manx Radio, live from the studios here on Douglas Head in the Isle of Man, and parts of it bathed in sunshine, other parts fairly cold and dull by the looks of things. We'll update you on the weather forecast just after the 11 o'clock news. But let's get back to our English and Manx version of the Norse kings, so prevalent here in the Isle of Man, and a bit of Norse language maybe in it as well, Jennifer?
Vai hoch kied is feed, vai shenne kied ling lochnally on se voer vannen. As lurg shen hein a smoojau, gawi had grime a talu, as ren a toyach de tannachten son a gowre. Tre had shawl a mach ons na balion. Nish, harau had just geri spoil, les lingus and kagi, as shawl a sool as guten, ach ren a lal ok, de gen talu, as core pun reriachten. So, around the year 800 to 820, this was the first time that we really have records of the Norwegians, the Norse, in the Irish Sea, the Manx Sea. And after that, more of them came. They poured in hordes, and they started biting themselves fast, as it says in Norwegian, on the land. And they started to stay over for the winter, the time when they couldn't sail out in their longboats. And now they didn't just want to do raiding and plundering with these war galleys that they came with, and then sail away back to Norway with whatever spoils they'd managed to acquire. What they wanted to do was to get land and to settle down. As Tommyson Lai Perchen Law Shaw ons Lochlanish, Mishen, Nother Clash and Bing de Lochlanish. I'll read a little tiny bit of that book that I'm working on at the moment in Norwegian so that you have a chance to hear Norwegian. Eerst geschön var gryte som alltid stod I kokk. Alltid var det oro og strid, og ingen vann sigre som kunne kjøle av og gi ro. I 839 kom høvdingen Torkels med I store kongeflotte, sier Irske Annale, og gjorde seg til herre I Dublin og over alle fremmede I landet. Var det vår vann kari skje klai, var det kinja kage a strada, nach hoe slaie variacht as machine weer ski talu. Onze vleen hoch kied 3 jages daid, heng Torkels, tosh no, les lingus reol, gawe poor ons divlin. As veeri harish uljune jorien onze cheer shaw, te schreeuwt machine ont recordus janach. So, I said I would read a little bit of the book in Norwegian, and I have actually put into Manx later on, so I won't translate the Norwegian because you'll hear it in a minute. But at the time, the Irish Sea was like a boiling cauldron. There was trouble and strife and fighting all over the place, and nobody ever seemed to win a decisive victory so that they had time to settle down and have a bit of peace. And at one point, finally, a new chieftain came called Torkils, came with a royal ship, and he managed to establish himself in Dublin after he'd forced everybody else out of it. And the Norwegian says, and he became the king over all the strangers in that country. And this is according to the Irish annals.
Okay, thank you. We got more on the Norse kings throughout the morning, through till 12 o'clock today, and very interesting to hear it in there, and in all the different languages as well. It's quite fascinating. And Jennifer, a text has come into the program. If you want to send an email in, you can do so, studio@manxradio.com, or you can use the dedicated one for Moghrey Jedoonee, which is MJ, or Mike Juliet, @manxradio.com. That's as simple as that. Or you can text in 166177. And we were talking about how frowned upon it was many years ago, people speaking Manx. And this person sent a message in saying, true story, years ago, a local group met in the well-known pub in the south of the Isle of Man to talk their Manx, and they were told to leave if they carried on speaking in Manx.
Yeah, I've heard that many times. And I think cousins of mine were, in the old days of the Growdle Glen, I think cousins of mine were speaking Manx in there. And I don't know whether they were actually asked to leave, but certainly people made clucking noises and were disapproving. And my cousins, I'm afraid they're of the Kewley stock, so that they just kept on talking Manx as a kind of protest. But they were made to feel unwelcome when they were doing it. I never experienced that because I probably came back to the Isle of Man too late and started doing Manx too late. And by the time I became interested in Manx, well, I was always interested in Manx, but I wasn't here to do anything about it. By that time, I think there was already a movement in favour of Manx. So I was fortunate in that respect that by that time, a lot of work had been done already by people like Douglas Farragut, people like Adrian Pilgrim, people like Robert Thompson, people like Walter Clarke, Leslie Quirk. All these people were great figures of fate already by the time, and John Crellin, indeed, who helped me in the beginning.
Yeah, and it's fascinating when you look at the contrast between Wales. You know, when you go there and the very deep parts of Wales that speak so much and so proud of the language, if people go in there and speak English, they get the opposite sort of effect sometimes, don't they?
I never experienced that in Wales, but then there was one stage in my life when I was pretty good at Welsh, because I actually spoke Welsh before English for some mysterious reason that we don't need to go into, because I was sent off to Wales as a very small child. So I've never really experienced that. I've never experienced that kind of bad manners from the Welsh. And after all, speaking English in Wales would not be quite the same as speaking Manx in the Isle of Man, because the Isle of Man is the home of Manx. Wales is not the home of English. So, I mean, the Welsh would have more right to throw you out for speaking English than people in a Manx pub would have to throw you out for speaking Manx. I would have thought we were talking about moral rights here, but anyway, who knows? No,
that's what I was sort of agreeing with. The Welsh are so proud of their language, and they've kept it going so well in a country and part of it without a sea to divide them, and yet they've kept it going and so proud of it, and quite have. Rightly. All right, lovely. There we go. We've got plenty to get through on this morning's programme. We've got a Manx track to take now, though, and it comes from King Kewley from an album called Nish, and this is a little ditty called Russian. There we go, an interesting version of a song called Russian there, and that's from the band King Kewley from an album called Nish, back 2006. That one goes back as far as. Right, Jennifer, you got some more?
So, Eerlug hiedling na lochnali, as eerlug vad na Christinen. Va koljabachen och, as ram jenu on jackachoch, as va graiox on kaga. Waar ram kage goler the bredigen. Trevad goit ons kappies, na keerten, ren a cosnada, a noid, dolit, a spoit. Scumma me eis in a brereke. Sonda ve ri in a tosh, eg a tre show, baslan gentis corpac shirit. Lurg shen had on an ouderlach boch, giri and hiek, rish. And so this is a small piece of information that would perhaps tell you, Simon, why I said that the Norse kings were hardly examples and the Norse chieftains were hardly examples for little girls to be wearing little badges on their gym tunics. Even after they'd settled here and even after they'd become Christianized, they had masses of concubines and they had masses of illegitimate children, and they loved fighting because that was where you won your honour. And there were a lot of fights between brothers. And you can imagine, if there were a lot of concubines, the king might have one wife and then he might have several concubines, and they would all produce children, and they would all think they had a right to be the chieftain or to be the king, and therefore they fought each other. And quite frequently, when one of them was captured by his brother, he would be blinded and he would be castrated. And it didn't matter if he was your brother. And the point of all this was not just malice. It was because in order to be a chieftain or to be a king at that time, you had to be a perfect physical specimen. And obviously, if these acts had been enacted upon you, you were not a physical specimen anymore. So that would mean that you could no longer seek a high office.
I can imagine it wouldn't have been go into the waiting room and the pre-operation room or anything like that before either.
I don't know how they did it. I haven't actually gone into the details of that, but I'm sure it wasn't very nice.
No, indeed. All right, thank you very much indeed. Sunday Opinion is on after the 12 midday news today, and in the week that the Isle of Man budget 2018-2019 was approved by Tynwald, Treasury Minister Alfred Cannon MHK will be Roger Watterson's guest on Sunday Opinion today. They'll be taking a closer look at some of the measures outlined in Mr. Cannon's budget speech and their implications. That's all on Sunday Opinion, just after the 12 midday news with Roger Watterson here on Manx Road. Well, we're rapidly approaching 11 o'clock news time, Jennifer, and on the second hour of the programme, we got more on the Norse Kings, plus an interesting little book you've got there with you.
Yeah, well, to finish up what we were going to say about the Norse Kings, I thought that I would read some of these stanzas from a ballad that's known variously as the Manx Traditionary Ballad or the Manannan Ballad. And really, the title in Manx was an account of the Isle of Man in song. Cundagin Ellen Rannan Ons Aren. And a few years ago, I had this book where I did an introduction about the ballad, and I did a new translation of it, and I tried to put it in rhyming stanzas. And so I thought that the portion of it that might be of particular interest to us and to our listeners is the portion that deals with the Norse kings, the last of the Norse in the Isle of Man, and just ending with a rather cynical word of warning to the Manx.
Okay, all right, we'll look forward to that in the second hour. We've got the break to take now and a track to take us to the news with Ed Oldham at 11 o'clock. It's 6.5 minutes before 11. Well, dry with sunny intervals today, but still cold with a mostly fresh east or southeast wind. Temperatures only reaching 4 Celsius at best today. The outlook rather cloudy on Monday, but still cold and dry with a brisk easterly wind. Generally cloudy on Tuesday with a few light snow showers. The showers becoming more frequent on Wednesday, accompanied by a strong and bitterly cold east to northeast wind. And let's hear that translated in Manx now with Jennifer Kewley Draskau.
As nem shidu chirim as grianach nu as nall as na sfere gain ya nan ya hui for the biru on. Merach Jedoonee and she as firu late hoyagari chirim bodulachs and a cood smoo as fear for the vreshtiken den yacht as jimert kosolach as for the nusmeva.
here on Sunday morning. Moghrey Jedoonee, it is in Manx with Simon Clarke and my guest on this morning's programme, Jennifer Kewley Draskau. And in the first hour of the programme, Jennifer, we were talking about the Norse kings and the history of them and the stories about what such gentlemen they were, and in English and in Manx as well. We're going to continue that before we get on to the book.
De Goddard Craven a rí lochanish na smú uit guach ons mannen. Te ram bieledisten machiaun Goddard. Hug na mannen nie daar en een orrie. Wat greed around na voorhuizen. As wenn ik jou klagen er wedden ege, er val wie trouwde as kus grammens griste. As tre gau I tollu, a kiet ons mannen, va suller as rolegach vaan, as honnig Goddard na loregen, as doorde, va shen a red tan mish dus mannen. As the mannen I force grey, red moor rigori, dan Milky Way. So the first of the, and probably the most famous of the Norse Kings of Man, was Goddard Craven. And there are a lot of stories about Goddard, who was called Orri by the Manx. One of the stories says that he was a giant and that he was in the habit of chucking stones and rocks at his wife because he was sick of her nagging him and calling him names. But perhaps the most famous story about Orri is that when he first landed in Man, he landed at the Len with his longboat, his longship, and it was a starry night and clear, and he looked up and he saw the Milky Way, and he said, "That is my road that brought me to this place. That is my road that brought me to Mannan." And the Manx still call the Milky Way the Red Moor Rigori, the great road of King Orri.
Wow, it's fascinating, isn't it? And yeah, that's something you see, you hear a little bit of history about it, and it's just something that I've heard for the first time about the road up to the stars.
Well.
Yeah, very interesting. It's Moghrey Jedoonee here on Manx Radio, 15 minutes or 11:15, whichever way you prefer it. We're talking about the Norse history of the Isle of Man, and particularly the kings, with Jennifer Kewley Draskau, and in English and in Manx as well. So we'll have a bit more of that.
Ten shan vanag vananach fin as ocean, kianglit rish skielen ons tail na ljoren as recordus en jernish as albanish, as tan leid ons mannen begin. De shinne skiel me jaun na rei, hug Gareth McMona, eild en tai fin McCole, va fin as ocean as soels on a helg. Ons a tai fin va ram ren as ininen, as callieren, as ram modi as qualionen. Ach ons a vanag maninach. Fin as ocean. Harawe McMona as hugge eild an tai, ons vanach vanach, ach paiach en missit Orri Beg. Tan vanach grey the row Orri Beg, Corrie Jurg, a far renni ninen as nam ran sprotch, as renad gammon jay. To shen fear him all, a far te selge, na ne scalen vine weach fianach, jernish, as the traditionen lochlinish, gol stiach regelia as covesta ons mannen. De shen gun kozolach as doeltach. Hanel shen skriwt ons ljor lochnach, ach eliam de wel stoes im holon, anshabi. And the Old Manx ballad Finas Ocean is closely related to the stories from what's called the Fiannacht in Irish. It's linked to many stories in Irish and also in Scots Gaelic, and it tells about the time that a fellow called Gareth McMona set fire. They were always setting fire to each other's dwellings, and they set fire to the dwelling of Finn McCole. And at this time, Finn McCole and Oisin were away hunting, and in Finn's house, probably rather hyperbolic, there were hundreds of women and hundreds of young girls, hundreds of old women, and lots of dogs and lots of puppies, about 300 of each of these categories of beings. But in the Manx ballad, Finas Ocean, it wasn't McMona who set the house on fire, it was a fellow called Orri Beg. And in the ballad it says that Orri Beg was in a terrible rage because the women and the young girls had been making fun of him and had mocked him. And this is very interesting because it shows how the stories from the Fiannacht, the Irish Fiannacht, and the Norse traditions run together and join together in Man. and it's unique. And so it's very, very interesting. Now, this doesn't appear in the Norwegian book that I'm reading at the moment, but it has been written about, and you'll be able to see something about it in the new history of the Isle of Man when that's published shortly.
Okay. But Oceanbeg is little, isn't it?
Oribeg would be Little Ori.
Yeah,
yes. I don't know why they called him Little Ori, but of course there was an Olaf who was very, very small and was sometimes called Olaf the Dwarf, as well as other things. Mm-hmm. But why this person was called Oribeg, so far I haven't been able to find out.
As we mentioned, Sunday Opinions after the 12 midday news. Roger Watson with a guest, the Treasury Minister Alfred Cannon. Mark Tiley sits in for Christy DeHaven on the Sunday soundtrack this afternoon from 2 o'clock until 5. Takes you through to Paul Corkish on All Request Sunday. Bob Carswell's here at 8 o'clock with more Manx for you on Clare na Gael. And then Judith Lay will be here on Sundown to round and ease you out of a tough old weekend. Right, let's have one more piece then. The final bit on Norse Kings, Jennifer.
Jon Learfall. An ochta Jane Lord Hamidjin Danish, 1000 år per man, 1000 blenten ons mannen, skriver vel lært in wel, Jew, salige na shan lagting, as riksmøte, norlandish. Te skriver vel hanel na mannen i na bonken fast credu na shen. Ren na mannen i sjåle slen magerte tail, as ta kommelsus, kochjanlichen mai, les tjerigen elja. Tan mannenach, kjolach, as smunjachtach. Te sheltjenes bertjach ege, tannet din wiest an rail lochlenach, ach dan rail sostenach, tad a serkriach, as kuna les jorien, as a lei les lochleni. Te tresh dem, de vel me koherigen, as machine, feudach dan amas shen. So, Jon Learfall, who is the author of the book that I'm translating at the moment, 1000 år per man, 1000 years in man, writes that Tynwald Day reminds Norwegians of the old lagting and riksmøte that were held in Norway. And he also writes that the Manx are not country bumpkins. Quite on the contrary, the Manx have sailed all around the world, and the Manx maintain excellent relations with other countries. He says of the Manx that they have good sense and that they are thoughtful people and that their rich imagination has been developed owing nothing particular only to the Norwegian side of things or to the English side of things. It's quite unique. He says that the Manx are open-hearted and they're very friendly and helpful to strangers, especially if they're Norwegians. So I'm hoping that I and my fellow countrymen are deserving of this high opinion.
Oh, that's a nice ending to that piece. Next on the programme, Jen, you're going to talk about a book that's there.
Well, I thought I'd read a few stanzas from the account of the Isle of Man in song, the Kunta Jael and Vannon on Seren. Per de blenten de henje, ren mi chindelio beg in misset Kunta Jael and Vannon on Seren, se short de vanach as de chandelier. Han elfis einen quae skriw vanach shaw, ach tan ucht skriw mechaun regori, as a look thicker, as mechaun na Albany. So I translated this little book, this ballad, quite a few years ago, and it's a sort of ballad. It's in stanzas. The original text, there are various copies of it, and they were reconstructed by the late Robert Thompson, who did so much for Manx in his day and who was so sadly regretted. And I made a new translation of it and tried to make it rhyme. Whether I was successful or not, you'll have to judge for yourselves.
We'll do that in a second or two, yeah.
I thought I might read the bit about King Orry and his family, and also about the Scots.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll do that second. Yindasak, as they say. Let's do the weather forecast in English and in Manx for you. Dry today with sunny spells, but still cold with a mostly fresh east or southeast wind. Temperatures only around 4 Celsius today. Rather cloudy on Monday, but still cold and dry with a brisk easterly wind. Generally cloudy on Tuesday with a few light snow showers coming. The showers becoming more frequent on Wednesday with a strong and bitterly cold east and northeast wind. Let's have it in Manx now. From
As the
Jennifer.
Lemshidu, Chirimus Grianach, News Nall, as the Sphere, Gay Nia, Nanya Hui, for the Biro on the sledge to me crow. Merach Jedoonee, she is Fidu Lay, Toyagdari, Chirim, Bodulachs, and a cool smoo, as fear, for the Rashik of Nachter. As Demert Kozolach, for the Smether.
Okay, the Duty Chemist wrote for today, Sunday the 25th of February. In Peel on the West, you can go to Clear Pharmacy, 6 to 8 Michael Street in Peel, which is open midday till 1 p.m. In the south, it's Castle Pharmacy, 20 Maloo Street in Castletown, also open midday till 1 p.m. Ramsey in the north, Lloyd's Pharmacy, ShopRite in Barring Road, open now until 2 p.m. this afternoon. And in Douglas, there's 2 Lloyd's Pharmacy, ShopRite in Victoria Road, open now till 2 p.m. Or Boots the Chemist in 14 to 22 Strand Street in Douglas, which is open till 4:30.
The Nation Station, Match Radio.
Okay, 27 before 12. Let's have the second of our Manx tracks this morning. And this is from a lovely album called Beneath the Twilight. And this is from Emma Christian. And this is track 3 on this album. And it's called Gay Jedoonee. Well, that is even more haunting in a nice way through my stereo headphones here in the studio. That is the wonderful voice of Emma Christian, and from an album called Beneath the Twilight, and that's called Gay Jedoonee, if I've said that right, Jennifer, have I?
Oh, yes.
The translates into the Sea Invocation. So there we go. Right, the book you were talking about earlier.
Well, the first bit I'm going to read is about it's a history of the Isle of Man. The ballad pretends to be a history of the Isle of Man, and this is after the Isle of Man has been overcome by St. Patrick and all his minions, and all the supernatural beings like Manannan have been evicted from the Isle of Man. And so I'll read a couple of verses in Manx, and then I'll say what I put that they meant in English, and there are, you can argue with that. So ma sé neist ren adsan becha, gen dunya ach yinna goru curry, ach gal de gedden padún vain rau, dere henke hook rí gorí. Leis a lingus rín as poor a rí, as gau e tolu ec a len. Shen kiad ec rau ruí, de ven a rí, an elian. So the folk potted on in their island home, little spectacular in their story, till on penal pilgrimage to Rome, Ori burst on the scene in regal glory. With warrior fleet and in kingly state, he thrust his dragon's prow aground on the Len shingle beach, embracing his fate, man's kingly destiny to found.
Yeah, nice translation of there, isn't it? And it is nice when you hear it in that sort of a sort of rhymey thing, if you know what I mean, in verse, so to speak. Yeah.
We do it quite freely. Well, I'll do another couple then. Hagael mi de renne skile ek poort, hamu renne marawon G. Ach de fist de denk je slucht, tri rechen jeg, je ri gori. Echt henk on quinja as henk on quail, henk taus de lie as rail on G. Na kishen moore as a male, vis de hira de brach et dunya de be. Now I never heard that man did ill, since he sprang ashore from his dragon bark. Not even in harbour did he kill. 13 kings he bred, our first monarch, and introduced meetings and the court, justice and the rule of law, and taxes, and the Lord's rent he brought to lumber our lives for evermore.
Okay. A text in just asking where Brian Stoll is. Brian just wasn't been too well of late. In good spirits, though, last time I was talking to him. But just needing a bit of time to recuperate himself and get some energy back in. So that's the situation there. So if you're listening, Brian, hope you're enjoying this morning's programme. And Jennifer, you're doing well here with all these translations of the Manx stories, and particularly this book here as well that brings some of these very old Manx, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah. When would that date back to the original
Well,
ones?
possibly around 1500.
Really?
Yes.
Was it changed since then a lot?
Well, the texts, there were various versions of the text in existence, and Robert Thompson managed to bring them together to make one fairly standardized text. A lot of obsolete terms in them, very difficult terms in them. So the language would have changed, and there are words. This is one of the reasons that Thompson was able to surmise a date for it, is that some of the terms had become obsolete later in the language, and so we're going back to quite archaic language in some cases.
Right, okay.
Yes.
All right, let's have a little bit more from the book then.
Met a redder be Jedoonee skele dew, Cogine moljach der manani. She ad bewesset an alien shiant, dach drochlai Jedoonee on G. Echt henken olster macri olbe, les lingis hrien de bre on G. As alien peen de mevoelish olsach. Hanel les dunnalis krach ei. Hadege bew jish look de rie, mak na hun gimmeke kjown. Ach ononan me bad doddy, hide de hire koene les rigol. And if this yoke makes you heartsore, on Manxmen then lay your curse, for the Manx made every rotten law. With the blessed isle her own dealt worst. Then Alexander, Scotland's prince, harried by sea and carried the day, an impressive show. Yet we learn since by guile not valour he gained his prey. Of royal lineage the Scots spared not one alive, even infants one night old. Yet one princess fled to the Saxon throne, her wrongs to there unfold.
Okay, we've got time. If you've got another one there, Jennifer, to go through.
We'll go on about the Scots then. As I'm apologising to any Albany on, but this is what was written many years ago. Halich as krache noide cheer, nach jage rosh as dage I, me yinnich e sauen, chourish e qualin, a gale na lie, a beggan brie. O Albany, me vou us few, as de hachte ek de hit on. Kamach nach duriu as vederie, me vou rie, as Moghrey Jedoonee. The foeman harried, then all sails set, he hastened to withdraw, as a hound bitch leaves without regret her runt pup in the straw. O Scot, if your trip was at all worth while, why did you then not deign to stay? To reign as king in the blessed isle was enough for the king of Norway.
Okay. Welcome back. It's 7 minutes before 12 midday today, and Jennifer Kewley Draskau, you got some more from the book about that was being translated from Old Manx and various languages as well, I suppose, involved.
Well, this is still blaming the Scot for coming and harrying and refusing to remain in the Isle of Man as the king. So Cren fa nach duriu was feiderie. Modurian ri mach ri lochran, a stagaliam de bachaliat, ne fee ve rock, Erskine the ching. What, not tarry to wing the kingship here? Perhaps after all you were too craven. How strange above your head we hear the harsh croak of the raven. Ach lig duas lot jenny neen gring, near as nach dagu bew och I. Henkies look ri lochlan as vi neen, the ri gori. So I'll sing instead of that maiden fine who alone escaped the bloodshed, princess of Norway's kingly line, and daughter of great Goddard. Helia as renki gusa ren gi soyach de vier chaw, as dan a denje henk Marie, huggerie palched ergit sore. When the princess entered the Saxons' hall, before her sorry tale was told, they showed her honour, her people all. They showered her with silver and with gold. Nach renne fenjach gi quavi, na crave a hilken gisakurt, ta mish dortish in de ri, erish verspulit as gin kunyort. Kianort. The king inquired who she might be. I am a great king's daughter, newly despoiled as here you see, and lacking a true protector. I'm going to finish with the last verse of the ballad as a kind of injunction to all of us Manx people. Ach shuish fear vachi elian shaw, nach bishu trimshach ach da bi. Gingy shuish gen mai as a no, hink bannock forst, their shoe ons cree. Islanders, don't sink you into a pall. We'll find a way yet to fling off care. We might get away with it after all. So take you heart, cast out despair.
Absolutely wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer, for coming in today here on Moghrey Jedoonee as a guest. And it's been fascinating to hear your knowledge of the Manx language and also your passion and interest in the history of it as well.
Well, it's a great honour to be here with you, Simon, and I feel very humble sitting in a seat normally occupied by my great friend and mentor, Brian Stoll, to whom I wish every speedy recovery and recuperation and all the best, and egg vi, as he will know.
Yes, and it's nice that this is the pleasure of doing this programme, because you get so many people who are just passionate about just keeping some sort of culture and thing of the Manx going.
Well, the last thing you and I did together, I think, was in the Bonnet play in Kirkmichael, wasn't it? And you've been treading the boards since then, as recently as last night. I wasn't involved in that, but a year ago, under the auspices of the late great Roy Kenyock, you and I were treading the boards in Kirkmichael in various pieces of dialect entertainment, as I recall, and a good evening was had by all. I think we must say.
Yes, they're very decent ones, and a good night last night as well. Thank you to all the people who were from the Michael players, Becky Traynor, Chrissy Cannell, and also John Willie Cacken as well, and Nicola Curfey, who were involved in it as well. And of course, it was sad at Christmas to lose Roy.
Terrible.
But, we tried to keep it all going as best we can, and we were welcomed by the audience at the Peel Centenary Centre last night. So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed for that.
In Roy's spirit, keeping it going in Roy's spirit.
Indeed. Okay, we're out of time. Thank you again, Jennifer Kewley Draskau, for coming in on the programme. And no doubt we'll have you on again in the near future. Thank you very much indeed. And
Shade away.